Welcome. This is the Drupal usability meeting for Friday, December 4th, 2020. I'm Benji Fisher, and also on the line are Paul Drivers joining us for the first time. Welcome. And Thomas Howell. Um, so, Paul, would you like to start with the issue you're interested in?
Yeah, sure. I'll just, can I share my screen at this point?
I think so.
Just pick the correct. So I'm just looking for the correct monitor here. Desktop.
So I guess I can start you off. I think the issue you wanted to look at is number 3185321. We always read the number in for the sake of the recording.
Okay, and you're seeing my screen now, yeah?
Yes.
Okay.
Can you read out the title?
Yeah, do not generate media name if the field is enabled on the media library form display. I'll just cross-reference this with another issue, if I may, and that is issue number 2320877. And this is not in connection with media fields, but ordinary file fields, about making the description field for a file field to be a required item. But really, I want to talk about media today, if that's okay. I originally posted this as a bug report because I saw an inconsistency between how file uploads work in connection with media and about naming them, and the difference between the default method of adding media via the path of media/add, and then additionally the inconsistency of how that same kind of process works when uploading to the media library. And this is all about how we describe with the title media items. Now in the issue I've mentioned another issue here, which is 2882473. And this is a discussion about whether or not to hide the name base field for a media item on the node forms. And long story short, there's a number of different base fields attached to a media item. One of them is name, and a decision was taken some time ago to hide this from entity forms by default, on the basis that that would be the 80% use case. That certainly in the case of images, nobody really has got an interest in attaching a name to each and every image upload as a media item. And that a good way forward would be for the media name to be generated and auto-populated, but kept as a hidden field. And I think that's fine completely for images. I do quite a bit of work with schools, mainly primary schools. I look after about 30 or 40 of them now. And schools upload a lot of policy documents and educational sort of learning materials to their websites. Typically, these are in a PDF file format. And sometimes they can have a descriptive short name as a file name. Sometimes it can be something fairly obscure. At other times, it can be a very long, drawn-out file name. But my point being is that when these are uploaded to the media library, if they just assume their generated name, it's not particularly user-friendly on the front end. And it makes it difficult to discover things via search or filtering in the media library. By the front end, what I mean is, I'll just give you a couple of examples of school websites. Now here is Settle Primary School, not far from me. This is a Drupal 7 site as it goes, and it's a dedicated page to policies. And here, sorry about the styling here, I've learned a lot since then. Here, they haven't been adding a description field descriptive name to these file uploads. So they're just taking on quite long-winded, in some cases, file names with a file name extension, not particularly user-friendly. In Drupal 7, well, actually in Drupal 8 as well, a regular file upload also has an optional description field, but it's not a mandatory field. So even if it's enabled, it doesn't follow that people will fill it in. And that's what's happened here. What I want documents to look like on the front end is more like this, which is a Drupal 8 site. And here we've got a more attractive listing of policy documents, PDF uploads that have been given a human readable name. Now, in order to bring this about, I wasn't, to be fair, when I first did this, aware that there was a name base field for media items. So I went to the extra effort of actually fielding these and adding a title field to these media items, which I made mandatory. And by doing that, making them mandatory, people have gone to the effort of providing decent human readable file names, which can also be searched for in the media library or filtered in the media library. And I think in the case of documents, rather than it being the 80% use case that people are quite happy with a generated name, as they would be with images, I think in the case of documents, it's more like 80% that would think it's a good idea to give files a human readable name. But if a field isn't there on the entity form, then there's nothing to fill in. So these generated file names will just get taken anyway. So to illustrate the point there, perhaps just to sort of run through a real quick demo of what core supports now, how it works, and just to point out what I think is an inconsistency and what I think would be a usability improvement. Probably for not a big effort, I wouldn't have thought code-wise, but not that I'm the right person necessarily to qualify that last statement. So if we look at the normal way or the core way of uploading a media item, we'd go to the path of file, media, add, and here we can upload a media item directly to the library. And we'll take an image for a moment. If I just now go and browse for an image, here's one I prepared earlier, upload it, give this some alternative text. Click save, and there, the item there now is in the media library. The media name is exposed in the media listing table here. And here we can see that a generated name has been added based on the actual file name. If now I go to add a document, I've created two document types for this particular example. First of all, you've got your standard core document. Now here, if I add a document, I'm being prompted with an option to give it a file description. Okay, but if the file description is not mandatory. Okay, I could have file description disabled, but because it's not mandatory, I'm just going to be a lazy editor, and I'm not going to give it a description. So once again, we can see here that our document has assumed the raw file name. Now, another option that we've got is that you can go into the form displays and you can choose whether or not to include the file name. By default, it's disabled. So I'll just add now my PDF document type. And here what I've done is that I've made the file, the media name, mandatory. So I have to populate this now before I can complete the upload. But this is not the default behavior of core. Ordinarily, this field would be hidden on the entity form. So I've given it a user-friendly name, and now we can see in the media library, here it's assuming my friendly name. So in terms of these other things that we've got here, well, you know, in and amongst the filters, we've got a searchable, filterable media name. Now, if my document is, you know, or if the practice is that the document always assumes its proper title or its known name, shall we say, it becomes a very easy matter then to be able to search or filter in the media library to find a document that you know is in the library. A lot harder, I would suggest, for somebody to know what, especially if they're not the original content creator, far more difficult for somebody to know what the raw file name was if they wanted to locate a document in the library. So that's the default behavior with a direct upload. By default, the name field isn't on the entity form. So unless you've got the description field also enabled, it just assumes the file name. But now we've got something that I think is an inconsistency at odds. And that's if we go through the route of uploading a file via the media library modal form when attached to a page. So I've created a basic content type here with some fields. I put 3 additional media fields on here. I've put a cover image, and then I've also put a document there and the media name. Now I'm just going to go back in and I'm going to take away that description field actually that was attached to the working for the document content type, because I enabled that before coming on. So I'm going to get rid of that. Okay, so now I'm going to create a new page. Body text in there. So add my cover image. So the default behavior of the cover image is not to have any requirement to add a media name, and that's right for an image in most cases, I would say. Insert. Now I'm going to add my document media type. So right, here's the inconsistency. I'm exposing the name field here. So the name field is showing on the media library entity form display for a media item. But what's happening, as opposed to the direct upload method, it's pre-populating the name field with the file name. Now, if I'm minded, I can now, of course, go in and give this a more user-friendly document name. Go ahead and save it. Insert. Try with the other field now. I'm going to choose one with quite a long file name now, which are, you know, not uncommon. Okay. Again, there's a long file name. I'm going to be a lazy editor now, as in my experience, a lot of them are, certainly in schools. And when there's a, you know, you think you get staff turnover with schools as well from one year to the next and so on. And training isn't necessarily that great during staff handover. So I'm not going to bother giving it a friendly file name now. I'm just going to go ahead and save. And I'm going to go and, oops, insert that. So here's my long file name there now. On the front end, what does it look like? Okay, test page. Well, here, maybe some formatting thing I haven't done properly, but there we've just got a media icon, and here we've got this long, very long in this particular case, file name, raw file name, .pdf. In the, which isn't, it's not a good experience really for somebody on the front end. If we look now at the media library and, how tidy or not it is, we can see we've got quite a mixture of all sorts now. We've got a number of documents that have been given a human-friendly name. We've got a mixture of documents which are keeping their raw file name, not particularly searchable, not particularly well organized, stewarded, if you like. If we look at the grid view, then here we've got a right hodgepodge of some that have got file names, some of which, again, are a more user-friendly title. And that, I think, is both inconsistent in terms of the default upload method and the media library upload method. And I do think it's right that the default way that Core is set up for the name field to be hidden is probably right in 80% case for media items. But in the case of documents, I honestly believe it would be better almost always if a document was given a human readable file name so that it can be understood and searched for and filtered and so on. So the feature request that I put up, I raised this in the media issues, the media channel, I'm sorry, on Slack, and Martin Queen Proxima got involved, agreed it was a good issue, but felt that, especially at this stage in Drupal 8, Drupal 9, that were it to get any traction, it would be a good idea to sort of raise the issue here in this Slack meeting, because in any case, such a feature request would have to have a consensus with the among the usability team anyway for it to get anywhere. So my proposal is that where the media name field on a media entity is hidden as per the core behavior, nothing needs to change at all. But where it's made visible on the entity form, my suggestion is that the site owner has the expectation or that field should be populated by a human being. And so I'm suggesting that where the name is made visible, that a generated name isn't provided, that what's provided is an empty and required name field, which needs to be completed before the form is saved. And that's it. I'll stop sharing.
So you're not.
Unless you have any questions, where it'd be beneficial to keep the share for the moment, maybe.
Yeah, keep the screen share for now. So you're not suggesting that we change the default, but just that if someone does enable the name field in the form display, that we stop generating or stop pre-filling it with the file name.
And actually that's kind of, I guess, like with a lot of issues when you first posted, you start by covering all the bases and maybe talking too much and so on. And I've added a few comments since then. And when you get down to the more recent comments that I've made, I've distilled my own thinking and concluded that actually it's just a matter of, if it's hidden, make the name field required and not generated. If it's not hidden, don't change anything. So yeah, that is in the issue. And just to sort of illustrate the point here, so if I go into media types, take one that I haven't changed in any way yet. So if we look at the audio field, the audio media type, if we look at the form display, we can see that by default, the name field is hidden. And it's the same in the media library. So were I to upload a media file, the assumption would be that it should take a generated name from the file name. And that if I want to override that in any way, what I should do is move the, sorry, not the file, move the name field to be visible. And then at that point, the name, I will be prompted for the name at the file upload. But as I say, if it's already generated and pre-populated, I think there's a high probability in many cases, especially where you've got lazy editors, that they won't actually change that, that they'll just go with the file name. And I don't think that's particularly good for situations where the file name is an important part of a media item. So yes.
So it sounds like you're asking for a Boolean flag on these fields that allows you to indicate when you want name to be required.
I think that would be a complicated implementation. I think the Boolean idea, I mean, this Martin Fina Proxima mentioned a similar kind of thing. I don't think he mentioned Boolean, but we can assume that that's what he meant. And that would be one way of doing it, so that you could make a site owner, shall we say, could make a determination about which fields, you know, we're expecting an editor to populate in a proper manner. But a more simple implementation is that we don't have a Boolean, but we just, if the file's hidden, it gets populated. If it's not hidden, it doesn't. Which I think, yeah.
A correction.
Maybe use cases where that isn't right, though, granted.
Fina Proxima is Adam, not Martin.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought it was right.
And he's one of the leads of the media.
Does mean his bad books.
Yeah.
You might watch the recording after.
Oh, and also Christina has joined us, and I'm sure that it makes Christina happy to see that you're using the Claro theme in this little demo.
Yes.
Yeah, it's growing on me. It's come along a long way, hasn't it? I wasn't sure at first, like anything where things change, but it's certainly getting there now, isn't it?
Nice.
It's only down.
So, so the proposal in theory seems, well, on a first, as a first idea, seems like a nice UX improvement. Might be a little bit concerned with translations, for example, or which roles we establish to convert this file name into actually a name that will make sense. Actually, if we just, I don't know, I'm just thinking about translations and other things.
I agree that's a consideration, and I think all I would reply on a simplistic level is that you know, a generated file name, you know, kind of isn't translatable at all.
What I would do is, instead of just if, so on the first thought, it could make a lot of sense that by default is then if the name is enabled, then it gets populated. But this is just a role that we are talking, and people will probably don't see anywhere, and they won't get to that conclusion. So what I would do is actually create like a check or something like that, because if you have to actively go and enable the name, you really don't know anywhere. You don't have any text right here on this UI, as we are seeing, that if you put it in there by default, you're going to have an automated name. So that's one thing. I would add an option to make that possible, not making that by default. So the user is at least aware that this is happening.
Okay.
It's just like a check, and at least they will know that this is happening. At least we are giving them more control. And the other just vanished from my head. Oh my God. Friday afternoon here. Yeah, I had something else in mind and I don't know right now. Anyway.
It'll come back.
Yeah. So yeah, probably the first thing is the rule seems a little bit, so it seems nice, but it probably we need to communicate that somewhere. Obviously, we are making the UI more complex, but we are being more, we will be more specific, or people will know that this is happening.
Yeah, so that transparency is what I meant by a Boolean flag on this, because it essentially puts the behavior choice in the hands of the individual, the site builder who's moving name from disabled to enabled, so that they know that that's happening. There's also going to be kind of collateral damage in doing that. When you were demonstrating the media module and looking through the filters or looking through the names, the one challenge that we introduce is the filter is now doing a mixture of human readable names and file names, which can lead to like an inconsistent searching experience, because now if they know the name of the PDF and not whatever human label that had been attached to it, they can't find it anymore. So there may be an inherent assumption, and this is a may, it's not guaranteed, but if they see, okay, 80% of the use cases, all of the images are named with the file name, and then they search for the PDF name, it won't come up. So either having both a file name and a name filterable search, or having a single field that searches both other field. Like, I don't know if there's a perfect solution. I just wanted to point out that we are introducing something that could lead to a split or forked experience for users.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't thought on that, but that's true. Yeah.
Interesting.
Also, just thinking, obviously I'm thinking more on the UI. I'm thinking more on the behavior on where you by default get the name, the file name converted and moved automatically as the value of the name field. And then how is the experience of just going there and replacing it, like customizing the name after it's been filled?
Yeah, I mean, when, and actually I think Adam may have mentioned this in the issue when he posted a comment. A suggestion that he had was just coming up with a hook form alter, which would, you know, if the name was visible, would just clear the generated name on sort of page load, on form load, should I say, as a quick win to sort of arrive at the same thing, really.
Right. So I guess the point of that is addressing the question of whether this is something that should be part of Drupal core, or whether it's something that can be left to a contrib module or custom code on a site. And if it can be done with a hook form alter, that's an argument for not making the change in core. And that's, you know, an important consideration, but sort of not the job of the usability meeting. So I have 2 points. One is that there may be sites where the file name is what they want to use. If you've got some sort of document library and you have sort of rules and organization for how your files are named, you might want to use that. If we implement your suggestion, then it's very hard for such a site to do what it wants. They'll have to copy and paste the file name from somewhere.
Yeah, yeah. Which is where your Boolean idea comes in, isn't it?
So, whereas as it is now, it's fairly easy to overwrite the generated name, and the only thing stopping you is laziness.
Mm-hmm. Or training. Or training.
So
lack of it, should I say.
So I guess my second point is closely related, that this is really something that can be controlled by policy rather than enforced by how the site works. And
yeah,
so
certainly that, you know, that's difficult to disagree with. On the other side of that, you know, I tend to think this is something which would be a fairly common requirement for document-heavy sites. Now, I said I'd previously got around this by creating an additional title field on the media item. Very easy to do. It's a fieldable entity, and that allows me all the control in the world, really, to achieve, you know, what I want to achieve. But in order to bring that about, it wasn't just a matter of adding a field. It also meant altering the media views, adding bespoke filters as well. And my reason for pursuing this in a way is that I'm keen to, and I'm working actively on it at the moment, I'm keen to actually release a distribution for schools on Drupal.org aimed at primary and secondary schools. And from that point of view, I'm wanting to keep as closely to core as possible, to provide a vanilla type solution, and also to keep the, you know, the maintenance and support footprints as small as I can reasonably hope to keep it, really. So that's why I was hoping that something could be done in core rather than by adding additional fields. The other approach to this, which I mentioned briefly at the beginning, is mentioned in this other issue that I talked about making the description field required. Now, this is an old issue. This goes back to, goodness me, when was the first post? 2014. And it only went RTBC last week. Detaching ourselves from media for a moment, just a file entity if we use the Drupal 7 terminology. And it's also the case for Drupal 8. Every file entity has a description, sorry, not every, for in the case of documents, for files as opposed to, I'm sorry, as opposed to images. There is this, well, here, perhaps show this in Drupal 7 actually, because it was there back then. And this is the site, by the way, where they hadn't been using the description field. So if I go back to that particular page, policy documents. So Drupal 7, but it's exactly the same in Drupal 8. Here they had all the time a description field available to them. Never used it. So you just end up, now the media library searching, filtering was nowhere near as powerful in Drupal 7 as it is now. But even though the description field was available to them, they didn't make use of it. So you end up with these raw file names on the front end, which I sort of would suggest is not particularly user-friendly, especially, all right, they've gone to some effort here or to make the file name understandable, but that often wouldn't be the case. And the problem that you had here back in Drupal 7, and it's the same for Drupal 8, is that if we look at the structure, content type, basic page, manage fields.
Okay, but this is a separate issue, and
it solves the
already
same
RTBC.
Yeah, I think it solves the same problem though in a way. If the description field can be made mandatory, which is what this issue is about, it approaches the problem from a different side, but helps in the same way, really.
Okay, but let's not look at that issue if that's already more or less decided. And I think the consensus from the other people on this call is that the downsides of your proposal outweighed the upsides.
Yeah,
that
that's gross. Yeah.
that if what you want is the current behavior, then it's very inconvenient to automatically blank it out. That this is something that arguably should be managed by policy rather than enforced by code. And that if we do want to implement this, it should be a separate option. It shouldn't happen automatically just because you expose the name field.
Right. Okay.
So I think that if you want to pursue this issue, then you should go with that option. Thomas, Christina, am I
Yeah,
summarizing the
Yeah.
consensus well?
perfectly. Yeah. So I don't think, I think it's an improvement. It's a UX improvement. I mean, that you have this option. It's just that it's important that people is aware that they are creating this option, or they are making this available for people. Just giving the control, that's all. So yeah, totally agree.
Yeah, making it explicit's definitely important, because I've seen both use cases, and I've used both in the same site, where you want to have some fields that you want to force a behavior on and not others. So I think that the sad part is the best solution is more work. So I don't think I think the shortcut is below the threshold of what I would support. But if the work was put in to provide a patch, either something that made sense within core because it wasn't disruptive, and that may not be possible. So to Benji's point, it may be more appropriate to have it in contrib, but if it can be done in a non-disruptive way, I'd love to see that behavior by default. But I think there isn't going to be a quick and easy fix, because you are, no matter what, changing a lot of behaviors, and it has to be explicit. Like otherwise, you're just exchanging the use cases, and you're saying now you can't do the opposite. And
Yeah, sure.
yeah.
I get that. Well, that's actually it's been an interesting exercise, though. Certainly hadn't realised or thought in any detail about the possibility of disruption to existing sites and a switch over halfway. And of course, that's vital.
Yeah, it really just comes down to what the purpose is. And so in your use case, in your experience, you're seeing a particular set of what people are expecting as the behavior, and it makes absolute sense within your probably common use case, but it's not 100%. It's, again, even if it's a big chunk, and rather than 80-20, we just said 50-50, you're going to find use cases where people definitely want to use the actual names. They're used to searching for the names. They're in the media module, and maybe they're not even expecting to expose either of these names to end users, because file name on the media object, all of those things are being hidden. And so in that use case, there isn't a huge win, other than to the site maintainer, to the content generator who's reading through the media module. So you've got different use cases and who it is that you're expecting to impact with the behavior change.
Mm-hmm. Cool. All right. Well, that's certainly the consensus. So yeah, I need to refine the issue and make a suggestion, or repeat the suggestion, should I say, about a Boolean and some sort of optional tool, and then see what traction, if any, that gains.
Yeah, and also I think I think it's important to keep the issue summary up to date with the current suggested resolution, and
Yeah,
I will add a comment later to the issue suggesting what sort of changes you should make to the summary. I don't think we need to spend meeting time on that. And I would like to move on to the other issue that was requested for this meeting. So
I'll stop my share.
Thank you. And I will share my screen. I think that's the right one. So where? Okay, so here's the usability meeting. And here's the issue. So this is the issue that Aaron brought to our attention. allow book navigation title to be overridden by top level node title. Do you see that on
Yeah.
Zoom? Good. And the issue number is 2803187. So I think the screenshots show it pretty well. Oh, I'm sorry, that's not the, this is the screenshot I wanted to be a little clearer. So there's a block that gives navigation, and the title is simply book navigation. That's the default title. You can override it to say my site's book navigation, but the point of this issue is to make it give you an option to make it automatically update depending on which book you're looking at. So a site using the book module might have several books and use the title of the book, or more precisely, the title of the top level page in the book as the block title. So I've applied the patch. And here it is with the Olivero theme. So I have a page, I have a book with a top level page with the inspiring name of top level book page and 3 child pages. And I guess, let me demonstrate that if I use something a little more inspired, like Drupal usability meeting. So if I have, if my book is Drupal usability meeting, then the block title automatically updates and will stay there as I go through the book. So that seems like a nice feature, and the basic functionality is not what we're asked to address. The question is, in the block configuration, where I have the book navigation block, if I configure that, the question is this option name. Use top level page title as block title. And that to me seems a little bit verbose. And furthermore, that's not what I wanted. Furthermore, if I edit one of the pages in my book, then over here in the sidebar, I have the book outline section. And I guess if I refresh this page, it will say Drupal usability meeting as the name of the book. So that label is simply book. It's not top level page of book. And if I go to the outline tab instead of the edit tab, then I see the same thing. It's labeled as book. It seems to me that we should also use simply book as the label for here, use book title as block title. Or
Agreed.
possibly just use book as block title.
Yep, either of those sound good. Christina?
Sorry, I had to leave 1 second. I'm not completely aware of the whole conversation. So I'm not sure what to answer, sorry.
That's okay. Paul, do you have an opinion?
I'm just always a big fan of plain English and keeping the word count down. So
Right.
yeah.
Less is more is one of the mottos for this group.
The and I would ask myself the opposite question: do I want to change everywhere we call it book to top level page? And my answer would be no. So, and quite emphatically. So, if that isn't the right direction to go, and the simpler solution is to swap it out, and we can, again, you gave the two different examples, but simplification is like very, very preferable. And I don't know how anywhere else that I've seen where we call things top level page. Like that's a description. It isn't something that I've seen in our like Drupal language typically. Am I wrong on that?
No, I think you're right.
The only time I ever talk about it is in the context of explaining to people how to use menus.
So
just using my browser tools to update it. Use book title as block title. Should we just use book as block title?
if we want to be respectful of how it was named elsewhere, use book as block title would be the most accurate because it follows the same pattern, but it may be less descriptive. So it's just a question, do we want to be more descriptive here? Will people know what use book as block title means?
I think it should be book title.
Yeah. It feels more accurate, and it does change the pattern ever so slightly, but I think that that's a trivial difference. And if I were to look at the block, I would say that is the title of the block and it is the book. So book title seems accurate.
Okay. Well, that was a pretty easy one. Any other comments? We have a few minutes left. I guess Christina seems to have left the meeting. Are there any other, Thomas, do you have any other issues you'd like to bring up?
No, thank you, none today.
Okay. Paul, any closing remarks?
Well, firstly, I'd like to thank you for having me. I didn't know that these, well, I knew that they happened amongst the sort of core maintainer type level, but I didn't realize it was okay to just turn up and participate, really. And I'd like to participate again if that's an option.
Oh, you're certainly welcome, and we explicitly value having diverse points of view for discussing usability issues. So yeah, please do join us next week.
No, I'd love to. I'd love to. Thank you.
And if you'd like, I can even add you to the reminder that I forgot to send out in Slack. Okay, then as always, I'm never a fan of running out the clock in a meeting, so we'll just close this one. Thank you for participating.
Thank you.
And I will update the issue with the recording. I'll try to do it by the end of the day.
Thanks so much, Benji. Take care.
Okay, bye.